Good afternoon to you all. I hope you all are fine. You all are following, reading, studying uh, our SLMs that has been sent by uh, from the university. Okay, and in this class, particularly in ENM 6114, that is your British poetry, we'll take block one. Earlier, we have studied Fairy Queen, uh, Edmund Spenser's Fairy Queen, and I talked about how Fairy Queen symbolically represents Queen Elizabeth I, her inclination to Protestantism, and what kind of religious conflict was there in England during those times, during the time of Queen Elizabeth I. So there were two sects of Christianity which were fighting against each other or had a feud during that time. One was Protestantism, another was Catholic. So the Catholic Church, the Catholic sect, followed the Pope and Catholic Church, but the Protestants they solely believed in the book, the Holy Book, Bible. They followed it. Uh, for the Catholics, there were new amendments. There were new way of following the religion, which the Protestants didn't like. Protestants were more traditional. They liked the way that has been taught to them from early on. Uh, they did not. They did not find any necessity of changing it. So, during in this setting, there was a huge religious and social conflict. Okay, and not just religious and social conflict. Uh, because of these two, there was a major political conflict between Queen Elizabeth I and the other kingdoms were there. It is said that her sister was in the other kingdom. Okay, she followed Catholic Church, and in England during Queen Elizabeth's reign, who was from Tudor dynasty, they followed Protestantism. So the whole story is about a knight and a queen who who went for a pilgrimage, and during the uh, journey of their pilgrimage they have encountered many obstacles. One such obstacle was the dragon. So dragon symbolically represents an evil side of that society. And there was another character which represented uh, Catholic Church wanted to tame the knight, but as the knight was religious and pious, you know, he followed Protestantism and Queen Elizabeth's character, that is Lady Una, in that poetry. So, going forward with that, today we'll talk about the block one, that is Geoffrey Chaucer's Canterbury Tales, and most importantly, we'll talk about the prologue. Uh, okay, so this is a slide I made early on, and I think I have just write other things too. We'll skip that, and that will be there for your reading. Okay, so this is like the course objective. Okay, mm, how the evolution of poetry took place. Okay, because we are following British literature from that 500 AD to the Victorian age. Victorian age, let's say, that is 1850. Okay, so the social background had changed, the political background had changed, so is the poetry of that time. And religious sentiments has changed. Is it? Is it not? Uh, so with those backdrops, the poetry of those time also, their themes, their genre, their primary character also change. So we will see the language and literature evolution in this topic, art of storytelling. So when we were, studying Fairy Queen, we talked about a special kind of stanza that was invented by Edmund Spenser. What was it? It was the Spenserian stanza. Okay. There was also Petrarch sonnets, 14 line sonnets. So each of these literary tools had, sorry, some important, some crucial tone to their day and age. Okay, in those backdrop they had written a new type of art they had invented. So all those things somewhere has an importance that we still read those poets, still wrote to their poetry, read their poetry, just to understand the society of that time, the literature of that time, and how literature has evolved. Okay, so and so if we go for further, the emotional over reason, as I said, you know. Uh, if you see the poetry of 500 AD, uh, let's say Canterbury Tales by Geoffrey Chaucer, which is it's kind of is very moralistic. And later on, if we see this thing, Fairy Queen, okay, which means the main theme is religion, the religious sentiments follow it. So what we can see is these things are away from reason and rationalization. Rather, uh, they are more dependent on this thing, uh, emotion, and their belief system, not scientific inquiry or reason or philosophy. Okay, things like that. In essence of satire, how how these poets moved uh, the people of those times, the backdrops of those times, like Alexander Pope in The Rape of the Lock. So, Locke is he's talking about the hair lock, and there is a certain character of Belinda, जो सजती संवरती है, in front of her mirror, and she takes a lot of time, and he makes a mock epic on Belinda getting ready, okay, for some function, let's say, or anything. Okay, so what he was mocking was, the the creamy layer of that, the the high strata of those times, and how how they had lived, and which could be mocked, and because that was very uncomfortable, but for the attention, for the to not miss out from that period how people lived. Okay, so all those things Pope has mocked in Rape of the Law. Moving on, so these are course outcomes and all, you can later also you can see. Um, So much so, these are very much connected to what I have said right now, and doesn't need further discussion. Moving on to the main thing. So here we will talk about the Knight's Prologue in Canterbury Tales. It is very important from the point of view of your exam, and then Knight's Tale and Wife of Bath, and other things also, non-priest tale also we will see. So let's move on. So these are the topics we'll cover under Geoffrey Chaucer's contemporary tales. Yeah, so let's see a little bit about Geoffrey Chaucer, the poet writer, okay, narrator of the story, because he is a very prominent writer in English language, in English literature in England. Why so? Because the Canterbury Tales is such an important piece of literary work. Okay, and Geoffrey Chaucer's contribution, most importantly in English language, they said that otherwise there would have been more prominence of uh, French and Latin in England, rather, if not for Chaucer and his group of writers. Like during, uh, you know, in every period there is a guild of writers that work together, to for some movement or something like that. Like in India, and during partition, there was a group of writers. Uh, the group had people like Ismat Chugtai or Manto, Sadat Hassan Manto, mm, who who resisted the partition. And they talked about mm, the sufferings of normal people. Chugtai perhaps written about feminism at that time. So what we see is that in every age, those writer groups had some kind of motivations and some kind of objective to their writing. So was our Geoffrey Chaucer. He was English writer of that time. At that time, people used to write in Latin too, in French too, and throughout all the colonies of Europe, these languages were very prominent, and Latin and French. These languages were the uh, language of the creamy layer, the upper strata, the noblemen, the kings, queens. These are polished language. Like আমাদের বাংলাতে যেমন আছে কেলুতে কথা বলে না, যেমন আহ, বেশি হাইলাইটে যদি করি, আমাদের ত্রিপুরার মানুষে আছে না কেলুটা বলতে বেশি ভালো পায় স্থানীয় থেকে। তো স্থানীয় ভাষা থেকে কেলুটা কেন বেশি ভালো পায়? আহ, why why a standard language in place of regional language? Because they see the importance of uh, written literature in uh, such and such language, which everyone appreciate. And so it is kind of what to say, normalizing one language over another. So those things are there, but with their revolution, the language English has come up. That is the most important thing we see here. So I was describing the importance of Geoffrey Chaucer, the master storyteller, and his importance during that time. And as I have said earlier, that Geoffrey Chaucer talked about the common man in his Canterbury Tales. That too in 5th century. In 5th century, when people, the writers particularly, they used to write about the kings, queens, and noblemen, about them, not the clergy or like peasants. Okay, wife of Bath's tale, he says. So all commoners' tales. He also talked about fate. This in this moral background, the religious background, when they say, if you do good, good will happen to you. But we also see that people who does good, bad things happening to them. So, is there any philosophical, moral, or religious backing to that? The answer is sorry again. This answer is vague. No one can answer that. Even the religious people, they might, give some absurd answer, but mm, there is no answer to it. Uh, Life, in fact, has no guarantee what will happen in next step. So he takes about the theme of fate in his stories, the theme of commoners in his stories. The center of story becomes a common person in 5th century. That was very, very, very rare. And even if you had read the historical documents of our state, or let's say the Bengal province, the subaltern or the common person, okay, his story is not recorded at all. So the inquiry that is there today to find subaltern history points to the fact that there was very minimal work on commoners. Mostly the works was on the zamindars, the kings, the nobles. Okay, so things as such. So in today's time, his work becomes prominent, becomes important to us. So that is the reason. Moving on to the next slide. Edmund Spencer Fairy Queen. I have talked about this in last class, last two classes. Let's move on. Let's not waste our time more. Dryden, Absalom, and Achitophel. I'll talk about it later on. Political backdrop, all those things. Pope's break of the look. Like I have just read a little bit about it, but in description we'll talk about it. So these are other blocks. We are talking about Geoffrey Chaucer's Canterbury Tales here. Okay, a little bit about Geoffrey Chaucer, which I have already talked. So here, the ideal knight, so there were okay. So I'll talk about the Knight's Tale. What happens in Knight's Tale? In Knight's Tale, there were two Theban knights. Who are knights? As I've said, you know, king, queen, noblemen, mostly king, queens, bodyguard, who used to protect the king, queens, used to go for battles, who were pious, religious, they will never move from their, religious inclination, their moral duty. They will always follow their moral duty. All those things. So there were two Theban knights. The name of the first knight is Palamon, and the other knight is Archie. Okay, so Palamon and Archie both fell in love. First of all, they were imprisoned. Okay, so they fell in love with a lady. What is the name of that lady? Emilia. Emilia was the name of the female who they have fallen in love with. So the what is the problem now? One person and two-person wants to marry that one person. Two person are persons are romantically involved with that person. So what the society says? One is to one. One is to go with one. Right or wrong? So Telemon and Archie, they had a contest, and Archie wins that contest. So when Archie wins that contest, you think, okay, Archie will win Emily. Okay, they'll get together. They'll marry together. All those things. But this is not a typical story. Why did it become a classic? Because the role of fate in the story. Archie dies. Archie dies. Who marries Emilia now? Will the defeated person marry him? marry her. Yeah, Palamon married her at the end. So how come Palamon marries her, Emily? Means this becomes a question because in other texts of those times, you'll see the role of karma, which is like things like karma, which are there in maybe in Christianity there is something like that. So karma is from our Hinduism maybe. So whatever means tit for tat. Okay. So this Archie, he was a better fighter. He would have won her. Why did God do bad to Archie? And not Palamon, who is defeated, who is same as Archie. I means, but at the end, Palamon gets humiliated. That was a question, whenever, if it's first time you are seeing this kind of stories that kind of struck people, like, role of fate comes now. Like, it's not always like you'll do good and good will happen to you. You will, perform better, something best will happen to you. Might not happen like that. The universe take its own time. uh, there is a role of fate, you know beyond your strengths, beyond your capabilities. Something else has its hand over your life. That is called fate. So Geoffrey Chaucer in 5th century very beautifully writes these things about Pelamon, Archite, their story, and role of fate. In those backdrops. So I have described the story of Pelamon and Archite in the story. And Knight's prologue is maybe before that. I will go to Knight's prologue. I wanted to give you an example of the stories inside, and not just summarize all stories and what happens together. Okay, so I have given you an example of Nightscape, but now we'll talk about the prologue. In Geoffrey Chaucer's prologue, what do we see in Canterbury Tales? Okay, so these are pilgrims. Know about pilgrims? Like, uh, you see that in every religion, there is, in most of the religions, there is a notion of pilgrimage. Like people in Hindu sect, we go to Gaya, Kashi, you know, okay. Uh, in our lifetime, this we think, the highest holy places, like, where we can go and somewhere we can find some solace. Okay, peace of mind, peace of heart in those places in our lifetime. Everyone wants to go there, whoever follows religion very strictly, their religion very strictly. So in Islam we say Mecca, Medina. So every person, every Muslim person, in their life wants to visit that place once in their lifetime. So in Christianity also, they have their own uh, place of worship, highest where they go for pilgrimage. In the prologue of Canterbury Tales, we see 30 pilgrims going for pilgrimage. So, pilgrimage used to be a long journey, because in those time, if you see, there was no motor vehicle. Motor vehicle came uh, later on. People like Ford who invented, the motor vehicles and stuff. Before that, people used to go in carts and bullock carts, or in um, backing in animals, like riding horses, all those. So 30 pilgrims, they were out for pilgrimage, and they used to rest in caverns and stuff. So, though in those long, boring journeys, somewhere they have to, engage in entertainments also. So, storytelling was one of the most traditional way of uh, spending time in ancient times, from ancient times. So, what storytelling does is, you know, it leaves you with something. It leaves you with something. If you play chess or something like that, it is a momentary thing. But storytelling, especially if you see the genre of oral literature, which has come from generation to generation through word of mouth, like in our local theater, we see the dhaki, our local theater, we see, uh, the songs they sing, or the acts they do. Those are not written, but during the time of harvest, they used to uh, do dhaki dramatization. They would play, some character, both together. This like enjoy, life during harvest. So there was a concept of local theater back then too. There was also a concept of oral literature, not from like written drama, but they followed something traditionally that came from mouth to mouth. Okay, so knowledge that has come from mouth to mouth, the literature that has come from mouth to mouth, the oral literature. So yeah, so 30 pilgrims were there. So they have made one decision: whoever tells the best story, they will get free meal. So, but what one thing that you should follow and note in this uh, topic, or okay blog, in Geoffrey Chaucer's Canterbury Tales, that these pilgrims had come from different sects, from different backgrounds, from different uh, financial backgrounds, from different political backgrounds. If you see the wife of Beth story, or like the story of the knight. So knight is kind of, engaged to the kingdom, the noble pursuit, and clergy also, you'll see. So all sects come, all sects, it talks something about all every sect in the story. So that is something that makes the Canterbury Tales uh, prominent. Yes, there are some characters, there are some, mm, the genres, that Geoffrey Chaucer has followed, just to better represent those pilgrims, their backgrounds, and their everyday life, or like through those stories, we can actually critique uh, the space, the sociological space, the religious space of those times. Okay, so like there was virtue, there was also vice. So Geoffrey Chaucer also takes up stories about external affairs and nuns who are very pious from the very beginning, then practicing affairs. Okay, out of what? Out of so out of their religion, they were they were strictly prohibited from, uh, let's say, the romantic activities. But Geoffrey Chaucer's works explicitly document their social life, and had there been no access such, he would not have written in his Canterbury Tales. Uh, why we study Canterbury Tales is because it's still relevant to them, and it talks about human morality in many aspects. So, if we see the nuns making an affair in those fifth century, okay, in those period, so there becomes a universal truthfulness in storytelling. Okay, that makes uh, Canterbury Tales great. Okay, each character great. So moving on to the next slides. Knight's Tale we have discussed. So in prologue, what else is left? So we have seen chivalry too in Knight's Tale, but we have seen fate too, the role of fate, and piety and warfare. We'll see those things like, as we approach other tales in Canterbury Tales. Each has its own unique theme, and each has its own way of breaking the normality of that time. You know, things and things so that that shows somewhere the relevancy of Canterbury Tales. So, okay, so we will discuss a few topics in later classes, and I will also discuss some questions in next class. For the time being, I'll give you some few questions in my PPT. Your work will be to study these PPTs, to study your SLMs as religiously, as obediently as possible, and to make notes of my questions. And you'll also get your assignments uh, very soon. So I'll take a okay. Uh, I guess it's a goodbye for this class, and we'll meet in next class. Okay, I'll take a leave now.